I've been cutting into dead things for 6 years, and I've never seen cells arranged like this. The specimen is laid out on the cryo table in front of me. 3 meters of translucent amber-colored resin encasing something that might have been alive 10 million years ago. Might have been, that's the operative phrase in xenoarchaeology, the one that keeps corporate funding flowing and papers publishing. We find things, we catalogue them, we preserve samples, and we never really know what we're looking at. But this one is different. I'm Owen Stoll, Senior Cryogenic Sample Technician for Helion Excavation Group, which is a fancy way of saying I'm the person who extracts biological material from ancient alien corpses and makes sure it doesn't decay before the science team can study it. Most days it's routine work, scrape tissue, flash freeze, label, archive. Most specimens are so degraded that I'm essentially preserving fossil dust. The researchers call it xenological archaeology. I call it refrigerated grave digging. Kepler 72e is a tidally locked planet, one face permanently scorched by its parent star, the other in eternal freeze. The corporation found the excavation site in the Terminator Zone, that narrow belt where temperature stays stable enough for equipment to function. 3 kilometers down, through basalt and compressed ice, there's a chamber. Just one. And inside it, sealed in something that looks like amber but measures tougher than titanium, there's this. The being. I'm going to call it that instead of specimen because looking at it makes the clinical term feel insufficient, is intact in a way nothing else we've recovered has ever been. No degradation, no cellular collapse. When I cut a viewing sample yesterday from the resin's outer edge, the biological material inside showed active molecular structure. Not alive exactly, but not completely dead either. Suspended. My supervisor, Carmen Webb, called it preserved at the quantum level, which is the kind of phrase scientists use when they mean, we have no idea what we're looking at, but it sounds impressive. She's been on site for 6 weeks, coordinating the extraction team, and I've watched her go from skeptical to obsessed. Yesterday she told me, if you can get clean tissue samples from the central mass, Owen, this discovery rewrites everything we know about biological preservation. No pressure. I adjust the cryo rig's extraction arm, checking the calibration for the 4th time. The arm is a delicate piece of equipment. Think surgical robot crossed with an industrial freezer, all mounted on a stability platform that compensates for the planet's 0.7 g gravity. The specimen rests in a containment field that maintains temperature at minus 40 degrees Celsius, cold enough to prevent any potential degradation, but not so cold that cutting becomes impossible. The being itself is hard to describe. Radially symmetrical, with a central mass about the size of a human torso, and 7 limbs extending outward in even distribution. Each limb branches fractally, splitting into smaller and smaller segments until they terminate in structures too fine to see without magnification. The tissues are arranged in spiral patterns, layers of different densities that create a 3-dimensional maze through the body. There's no obvious brain, no clear organs. Just this intricate geometry of biological matter that shouldn't work but apparently did. I'm supposed to extract a sample from the central mass. Core tissue, Carmen called it. The part most likely to contain whatever genetic or biological information made this thing function. I position the extraction arm, lining up the cutting laser with a section of resin about 10 centimeters from the being's central structure. The laser is precise enough to cut individual cells. It has to be. One wrong move and I could damage the sample beyond usefulness, which would make this entire 3-kilometer excavation a very expensive waste of time. The laser activates with a high-pitched whine that my earpiece automatically dampens. The resin resists for a moment, then parts, separating, like it's deciding to allow the intrusion. That's wrong. Materials don't decide. But the resin splits clean, and I can see the tissue beneath. It's not grey or brown like degraded organic matter, it's gold. Actually genuinely gold-coloured, with striations of darker bronze running through it in branching patterns. The tissue seems to have layers like tree rings. I guide the extraction arm deeper, preparing to core a sample the width of a pencil. Standard procedure. Get the sample, seal it, freeze it, archive it. I've done this hundreds of times. The laser touches the tissue itself. For a second, nothing happens. Then the tissue seems to exhale. There's no other word for it. The laser's contact point ripples outward like I've touched water, and something releases from the cut. A fine powder that catches the light, golden particles so small they hang suspended in the air inside the containment field. I pull back immediately, checking my suit's integrity seal. The heads-up display confirms everything is secure. The containment field is holding. The powder, if that's what it is, shouldn't be able to reach me through 3 layers of filtration and a positive pressure suit. Except the suit's ambient sample cycle kicked on when I made the cut. An automatic sniff that briefly opened a micro-intake from the containment field for analysis. A sticky check valve burped backflow for less than a second, before positive pressure reasserted. That's normal. That's how the system works. I breathed in when the tissue released the powder. I know I did because I can feel it. Not in my lungs, those feel fine. But somewhere behind my eyes, in that space between the back of my skull and the front of my brain, there's a sensation, like pressure building. Like someone just opened a door I didn't know was there. "Owen, how's the extraction proceeding?" Carmen's voice comes through the comms, making me flinch. I glance at the sample chamber. The laser is still active, and I've successfully cored a tissue sample about 8 centimeters long. Clean extraction, perfect preservation. Exactly what she asked for. "Sample acquired," I say. My voice sounds normal. "Sealing now." I guide the sample into its cryo vial, watching the automated system seal and freeze it. The procedure takes 30 seconds. The pressure behind my eyes doesn't change. "Excellent work. Bring it to the analysis lab when you're finished securing the specimen." Carmen sounds pleased. "The structural team wants that core tissue yesterday." "Understood." I complete the shutdown sequence, powering down the laser and retracting the extraction arm. The resin has already begun to reseal around the cut I made, flowing back together like it's healing. That's definitely not normal material behavior, but I add it to the growing list of things about this specimen that don't make sense. Hellian's brief notes the amber is field responsive, viscoelastic under the containment field's bias while remaining mechanically tough in bulk. The golden powder is settled onto the inside of the containment field, coating the transparent surface like pollen. I activate the field's cleaning cycle, which should incinerate any loose particulates with a brief burst of heat. The powder doesn't incinerate. It just redistributes, swirling in patterns that look almost deliberate before settling again in a different configuration. I stare at it for 5 seconds, then 10. The pressure behind my eyes intensifies. I need to report this. Procedure says any anomalous material behavior during extraction gets flagged immediately. But the sample is secure, the specimen is intact, and the powder is contained inside the field. There's nothing actionable to report except a vague feeling that something is wrong. I seal the lab, collect the cryo vial, and head for the analysis section. The excavation site is a modular facility. 12 interconnected units dug into the planet's surface, each one climate-controlled and pressurized independently. The corridors between modules are narrow, just wide enough for 2 people to pass if they turn sideways. Everyone hates the corridors. I've always found them comforting. Small spaces mean less distance for something to go wrong. I pass 2 other team members in the corridor connecting Lab 3 to the analysis module. Priya Mendez, one of the structural engineers, nods at me. "Owen, sample run go okay?" "Clean extraction." I hold up the cryo vial so she can see the tissue inside. She leans closer, squinting at the golden material. "Huh. Doesn't look degraded at all." "It's not. 10 million years and it looks like it died yesterday." She shakes her head. "I've been mapping the chamber where they found it. You know what's weird? There's only one. One chamber, one specimen. Who builds a tomb 3 kilometers underground for a single body? Someone who wanted it preserved, I say, or contained. She gives me a look I can't quite read. You ever think maybe there's a reason it was buried that deep? The pressure behind my eyes pulses once, sharp enough that I have to close my eyes for a second. You okay? Priya asks. Fine, just tired. I move past her toward the analysis lab. Long shift. She doesn't follow, but I can feel her watching me until I turn the corner. The analysis lab is cramped, dominated by equipment that costs more than my annual salary. Carmen is waiting by the primary scanner, a machine that can map biological structures down to the molecular level. She's 46, been in xenoarchaeology for 20 years, and has the kind of reputation that makes corporate investors nervous and academics jealous. She holds out her hand for the sample without looking at me, eyes fixed on the scanner's display. Let's see what we have, she says, loading the cryo vial into the scanner's sample chamber. The scan takes 3 minutes. The display builds a 3-dimensional model of the tissue, layer by layer, color-coded by density and composition. Carmen's expression shifts from interested to confused to something close to awe. This isn't possible, she says quietly. What am I looking at? She points to the display. Cellular structure. See how the cells are arranged in spiral geometries? That's not random, that's engineered, designed, and here. She zooms in on a cluster of cells near the sample's center. These structures are data storage, biological data storage. The cells themselves are encoding information in their arrangement. You're saying the tissue is a hard drive. I'm saying the tissue is a library. She turns to look at me, and I see the kind of excitement in her eyes that makes people do stupid things. This specimen isn't just preserved, Owen. It's deliberately encoded with information. Whoever this being was, whatever species built that chamber, they turned their biology into an archive. The pressure behind my eyes surges, and for a second I see something that isn't the lab. It's a landscape. Golden sky, structures rising in spirals, beings moving in coordinated patterns through architecture that bends in ways that shouldn't work. The vision lasts less than a second, but it's vivid enough that I lose my balance and catch myself against the scanner. Owen. Carmen grabs my arm. What's wrong? Nothing, just dizzy. Low blood sugar, probably. She studies my face for a moment, then releases my arm. When's the last time you ate? Breakfast, I think. Time moves strangely on a tidally locked planet where the sun never sets or rises. We run on Earth-standard shifts, but my internal clock stopped trusting schedules about 3 weeks into this mission. Go eat something. Get some sleep. I'll need you back here in 8 hours for another extraction run. We're going to core samples from each of the limb structures. I nod and leave before she can ask any more questions. My quarters are in Module 7, a space 2 meters by 3 meters containing a bunk, a desk, and a storage locker. I seal the door behind me and sit on the bunk, pressing my palms against my eyes. The pressure hasn't faded. If anything, it's getting worse, spreading from behind my eyes down into my skull, like something is growing in there. I try to sleep. That's the logical thing to do. My body is exhausted, and I have 8 hours before Carmen needs me again. I close my eyes and the visions start immediately. I see architecture that makes no sense, buildings that spiral upward and inward simultaneously, creating spaces that exist in more dimensions than 3. I see beings, hundreds of them, thousands, moving through these structures in choreographed patterns. They communicate without sound, their limbs forming shapes that carry meaning through geometry alone. And I understand it. The concepts, the intent. They're preparing for something. They're building toward a moment that requires absolute coordination. Then the scene shifts, and I'm watching them lie down. All of them, across multiple locations simultaneously. They're entering chambers, sealing themselves in resin that flows from the walls like living amber. They're dying deliberately, with purpose, with what I can only describe as joy. One of them, the last to enter a chamber, pauses at the threshold. It raises its limbs, and I feel the shape it makes like pressure in my chest. The gesture means, "We will continue." I wake up 6 hours later, drenched in sweat, and my workbench is covered in something I don't remember building. It's small, about the size of a coffee mug, constructed from components I recognize but assembled in a configuration that makes no functional sense. I've taken apart a data pad, a medical scanner, and what looks like a section of the air filtration panel, and I've connected them using wire stripped from the desk lamp. The structure spirals upward, each component slotting into the next with precision that would require planning and careful measurement. I have no memory of doing this. I reach out to touch it, and my hand stops halfway. Something in my nervous system refuses to complete the motion. My fingers hang in the air, trembling, while some part of my brain that I don't control evaluates whether touching the structure is permitted. After 5 seconds, the evaluation completes. My hand lowers. I try again, deliberately this time, forcing my fingers toward the structure. The resistance is stronger. My hand actually moves backward, away from the structure, guided by muscles I'm not activating. "No," I say out loud, to my own hand. "I'm in control here." My hand doesn't agree. I spend the next 20 minutes trying to dismantle what I built, but every time I reach for a component, my hands refuse. Eventually, I give up and shove the structure into my locker, where at least I don't have to look at it. I check the time. 6 hours and 40 minutes until my next shift. I should eat. I should report to medical. I should do something other than sit here trying not to think about the fact that my body just performed complex assembly work while my conscious mind was elsewhere. Instead, I pull up the facility's network access and search for any previous reports of contamination during xenological specimen handling. The database has 12 entries spanning 5 years, ranging from minor allergic reactions to one case of bacterial infection that required medical quarantine. Nothing like what I'm experiencing. I search for neurological effects. 2 entries. One researcher reported vivid dreams after working with fungal specimens from a swamp world. The dreams stopped after 3 days. The other entry details persistent migraines that resolved after the researcher was rotated off-site. Nothing about compulsive construction. Nothing about visions in languages I shouldn't understand. Nothing about my hands acting independently of my will. Someone knocks on my door. I freeze, staring at the door like it might explain who's there and what they want. The knock comes again, softer this time. "Owen, it's Priya. Can I come in?" I open the door. Priya is standing in the corridor, still wearing her work suit, and she looks like she hasn't slept either. "Sorry to bother you during off-shift," she says. I needed to ask you something." "Okay." She glances past me into my quarters, then back at my face. "Have you been having strange dreams?" The pressure behind my eyes pulses twice, hard. "What kind of dreams?" I ask carefully. "Buildings, architecture, like cities but not human cities. Everything is wrong, the angles, the dimensions. And there are these beings moving through them, and I can almost understand what they're communicating, but not quite." She pauses. "It started after I was near you in the corridor, about 2 hours ago." I stare at her. "You're having the same dreams I am. My exhale filters aren't rated for sub-50 nanometer carriers. If the spores piggybacked there, you could have caught a trace in the corridor air." "So you are having them?" She looks relieved and terrified at the same time. "Owen, what the hell is happening?" I don't have an answer, but I know who might. "We need to see Carmen. Already tried. She's not responding to comms. Neither is half the science team." Priya's hands are shaking. "Owen, I think something is very wrong with this excavation." The pressure behind my eyes spikes suddenly, hard enough that I gasp. And with it comes a certainty I can't explain. I need to go back to the specimen. Right now. because some part of me that's no longer entirely mine knows that the being in the amber is waking up, and it recognizes me. It recognizes me as kin. We need to get to the observation bay, I say. Now. Priya follows without arguing. We move through the corridors faster than regulations permit, past the empty mess hall, past the sealed laboratories, until we reach the observation bay that overlooks the excavation chamber 3 kilometers below. The chamber is visible through reinforced windows and a dozen camera feeds, a space carved into ancient bedrock, lit by portable work lights that make everything look like a stage set. The amber resin is moving, enough to see if you're watching closely. The surface ripples, subtle waves propagating outward from the specimen at the center. The being's limbs shift microscopically, branches flexing, spiral patterns rotating by degrees. "It's not dead," Priya whispers. "No," I say. "It was never dead. It was waiting." And now that I'm here watching, I understand what it was waiting for. The resin wasn't preservation. It was stasis, a seed state designed to last geological timescales until the right conditions arrived, the right host. I touched that tissue. I breathed in the powder. I let something inside. I wake up on the floor of Lab 3 with my hands covered in something dark and slick. Blood. My blood. But not from an injury. From extraction. There are shallow cuts on both forearms, precise incisions that run parallel to the veins, and the blood has been used to draw on the lab floor. Complex geometric patterns, spiraling outward from where I'm lying, each line connecting to the next in mathematical progression. I completed this 2 hours ago. I know because the blood is already drying, flaking at the edges. My conscious mind has zero memory of the event. This is the 4th time in 3 days. I push myself up, careful not to smear the patterns, and check the cuts. Clean edges. I used a scalpel from the equipment tray, which is still sitting on the floor next to me. Blade dark with dried blood. The wounds aren't deep enough to be dangerous, but they're deep enough to provide material. Material for what, exactly? That's the question I can't answer. The patterns mean something. I feel that certainty in the same place I feel hunger or the need to breathe. But I can't translate them into concepts my original consciousness understands. My original consciousness. That's how I've started thinking about it. The part of me that was Owen Stahl before I cut into the specimen. That part is still here, still observing, but it's sharing space with something else now. Something that has opinions about how my body should be used. I clean the blood off my arms and photograph the patterns on the floor before wiping them away. The photographs join 17 others stored in my personal archive, each one documenting a construction episode I don't remember. Structures made from lab equipment, formulas etched into wall panels, sculptures built from wire and frozen tissue samples. The medical scanner is where I left it yesterday, jury-rigged to run continuous monitoring on my neural activity. I check the readings and confirm what I already suspected. During the construction episodes, my brain shows activity patterns that don't match any known neurological function. The frontal cortex, where conscious decision-making happens, goes almost silent. Meanwhile, regions associated with motor control, spatial reasoning, and pattern recognition light up like I'm solving complex calculus while running a marathon. Except I'm not running or calculating. I'm building. The door opens without warning. I spin around, scalpel still in my hand, and find myself facing Carmen. She takes in the scene. Me, the blood, the weapon, the cleaned floor, and her expression doesn't change. "How long?" she asks. 3 days since symptoms started. No point lying. She's seen the footage. The facility has cameras in every lab. 7 others are showing similar behavior. Priya Mendez, Paul Tran, Sophia Spencer, Arthur Wright, 2 technicians from the excavation crew, and 1 of the security personnel. Carmen steps into the lab and closes the door behind her. They're all construction-focused, compulsive building using whatever materials are available. Paul tried to resist yesterday by locking himself in his quarters. This morning we found he'd disassembled his entire bunk and reassembled it into something that looks like a radio antenna made of mattress springs. Is it a radio antenna? We don't know. When we tried to take it apart for analysis, Paul became violent. She pauses. He broke Sophia's wrist defending the structure, then immediately tried to set the bone afterward, still not speaking, like his body was running two separate programs simultaneously. I set the scalpel down carefully. What does corporate want to do about this? Quarantine. Full medical isolation until we understand the contamination vector and develop a countermeasure. Carmen moves closer, studying my face. I convinced them to give me 48 hours to investigate first. I told them you're still lucid enough to provide data, and that data might be the only way to solve this before it spreads further. I'm lucid now, I say. I can't guarantee I'll stay that way. I know. She pulls up a chair and sits, which is somehow more unsettling than if she'd stayed standing. Carmen doesn't sit during crisis situations. Owen, I need you to tell me everything you're experiencing. The visions, the physical changes, all of it. I consider holding back. But the part of me that's still fully human knows this might be my last chance to provide useful information before that part gets overwritten entirely. The visions started first, memories that aren't mine. I see their civilization, the species that built the amber chambers. I see their cities, their culture, their final hours. I pull up the neural scans on the lab display. During these episodes, my hippocampus, the memory center, processes information like I'm accessing stored files. But the storage isn't mine. It's genetic, encoded in the tissue I extracted from the specimen. The golden powder you inhaled. Spores, that's what they are. Biological data carriers suspended in a protective medium that stays viable for geological timescales. When I breathed them in, they migrated to my brain and began unpacking their contents into my neural structure. Carmen's hands tighten on the armrests. That's not just contamination, that's transformation. I zoom in on a scan showing the foreign proteins multiplying through my muscle tissue. My body is being rewritten. The spores carry instructions, biological blueprints for converting Earth-based carbon chemistry into something compatible with their architecture. I'm not just hosting memories. I'm becoming infrastructure. Infrastructure for what? For them. For their resurrection. I pull up one of the photographs showing a structure I built during a construction episode. These aren't random, they're components. Each infected person is building a different piece of something larger. When we get near each other, our visions synchronize. We can feel the other pieces, understand how they fit together. Carmen studies the photograph for a long moment. You're saying this is coordinated, multiple hosts, multiple components, all working toward a single project, a distributed consciousness resurrection system. The words come out naturally, like I'm reading from a manual I've known my whole life, which from one perspective I have. Their species didn't reproduce through individual birth. They reproduced through coordinated extinction and rebirth. Every generation would deliberately die, encoding their civilization into biological carriers that spread across space. Millions of years later, when those carriers found suitable hosts on compatible worlds, the civilization would resurrect itself using the hosts as raw material. That's not resurrection. That's parasitism. They don't see it that way. I close my eyes, and immediately the visions rush in, clearer now, more detailed. From their perspective, they're offering immortality. The host's consciousness doesn't die, it just gets integrated into something larger. Individual identity dissolves, but the information persists as part of the collective. That's still death, Owen. I know. I open my eyes again, forcing myself to focus on Carmen's face instead of the golden cities in my mind. But they evolved past caring about individual survival. For them, the collective is the only thing that matters. Personal extinction in service of species continuity isn't tragedy. It's transcendence. Carmen is quiet for several seconds. What do they want you to build? Neurological architecture, physical structures that extend consciousness into three-dimensional space. When enough components are completed, they'll link together and create a network, a distributed brain made solid. The specimen in the amber will wake up fully, and it will have 8 human bodies to think with instead of 1 alien body. And the humans? Foundations. We'll still be here, technically. Our neural structures will persist as substrate. But we won't be individuals anymore. Just nodes in something larger that uses our chemistry to maintain coherence. Carmen stands abruptly, pacing to the far end of the lab and back. We're sterilizing this site, today. I don't care what corporate says about the discovery's value. This ends now. It won't work. I say it without emotion, which is perhaps the most frightening part. Sterilization requires thermal purge at over 1,000 degrees Celsius. The spores survive 10 million years of radiation, vacuum, and geological pressure. They were designed to persist through extinction-level events. High heat will kill the hosts, but the spores will endure. You'll just be destroying evidence and killing infected personnel, while the problem remains dormant until the next excavation. Then what do you suggest? Let me translate. The memories I'm receiving aren't just images. They contain information about how the resurrection system works. If I can stay conscious enough to map the process, maybe we can find a way to interrupt it before completion. Carmen looks at me like she's evaluating whether I'm still trustworthy or just another contaminated variable defending its programming. Eventually, she nods. 48 hours, you document everything. If you lose coherence or become a danger to yourself or others, I'm initiating quarantine protocols regardless of what you've learned. Understood. She leaves, and I'm alone with the drying blood patterns on the floor and the certainty that I'm running out of time to figure this out before the part of me that cares about being human gets overwritten entirely. 36 hours later, I wake up in the facility's main corridor with 6 other people standing in a circle around me, and we've built something that shouldn't be possible. The structure towers 3 meters high, constructed from materials that came from every section of the facility. Module bulkheads bent and interwoven like basket weaving. Medical equipment, disassembled and reconfigured into load-bearing joints. Sections of the water recycling system, repurposed as conduits. And tissue, strips of human muscle and skin, mine and others, extracted precisely and integrated into the structure's base like biological mortar. I can feel the ghost of every motion, every precise cut and placement, as if I'd been awake but locked in the back seat of my own nervous system while something else drove. Priya is standing to my right, her hands also trembling. Her left wrist is bandaged, the break from when Paul defended his structure. But she's here, and she was building alongside me, alongside all of us. Paul Tran is directly across from me in the circle, his expression blank but his eyes tracking. Sophia Spencer, her broken wrist in a temporary cast, stands next to him. Arthur Wright, silent and watchful. 2 excavation technicians whose names I should remember but can't access at the moment. And Ellis Armstrong, the security officer, who's supposed to be preventing exactly this kind of unauthorized activity. None of us speak. We don't need to. The structure between us is communication enough. I can feel it. Not with my hands or eyes, but with something deeper. The altered neural pathways that now connect me to the other infected and, through them, to the thing we've built. The structure is processing, running calculations using the electrical field generated by our collective proximity. It's incomplete, but it's functional enough to demonstrate what it will become. A node. A component of the distributed consciousness system that will think across physical space using human biology as its substrate. Owen. Priya's voice is hoarse, like she hasn't spoken in days. Are you there? The you that's you? I'm here. Mostly. The boundaries are getting harder to define. Are you? I think so. For now. She looks at the structure, then back at me. I remember building this, but not deciding to build it. like watching myself from somewhere else while my hands worked. Same. Paul's voice is rougher than I remember. My hands know things I don't. Yesterday I performed a surgical procedure on Arthur to extract tissue for the structure. I'm not a surgeon. I shouldn't know how to do that. But I did it perfectly, didn't even hesitate. Arthur lifts his shirt, revealing a neat incision along his ribs, already closed with medical-grade sutures. Didn't hurt. My body released endorphins during the extraction, kept me calm. Like it understood this was necessary. Because it is. Ellis speaks for the first time, and his voice carries a certainty that makes the hairs on my neck stand up. We're building something that matters, something that will outlast us. Don't you feel it? The purpose? I do feel it. That's the problem. The purpose radiates from the structure like heat from a fire, and the closer I stand, the more sense it makes. We're not building randomly. We're creating the foundation for something that will think thoughts no individual human could conceive, solve problems beyond our individual capacity, persist beyond our individual lifespans, and all it costs is us. We need to stop, I say. The words feel like pushing against momentum, like trying to redirect a river by standing in its path. This isn't us choosing. This is programming. What's the difference? Sophia asks. When you eat because you're hungry, is that you choosing or just biological programming? When you avoid pain, protect yourself, seek connection with others, are those choices or just chemistry? She's right, and that's what terrifies me. The line between autonomous choice and biological imperative was always blurred. The spores just revealed how thin that line actually is. The difference, Priya says slowly, is that we can recognize the programming and resist it. That's what makes it a choice. Can we? Paul gestures at the structure. We built this, all of us, without deciding to, without planning, without even being fully conscious. If we could resist, wouldn't we have done it already? I attempted resistance, multiple times over the past 36 hours. I took sedatives to force sleep and prevent construction episodes. Woke up anyway, found myself building. I locked my quarters from the inside and hid the access code from my conscious memory. Found the door open 6 hours later with no recollection of the override. I even tried harm. Small injuries designed to disrupt motor control, sprained fingers, a minor burn on my dominant hand. My body compensated effortlessly, redistributing the work to undamaged muscle groups and completing the construction with even greater efficiency than before. The spores aren't fighting my resistance. They're routing around it, using biological mechanisms I didn't know existed to ensure their programming completes regardless of my conscious objections. We need to document this, I say. If we're going to understand how to stop it, we need data. Or, Ellis says quietly, we need to accept that stopping it isn't possible, maybe isn't even necessary. Corporate is going to sterilize this site, I tell him. In less than 12 hours, thermal purge will incinerate everything in this facility. If we're still here, we burn with it. That gets through. Ellis's expression shifts from serene certainty to calculation. Then we need to finish before they can. Complete the structure, activate the network, demonstrate what we're creating. Make them understand this is worth preserving. It's using us to argue for its own survival, Priya says. That's what this is. We're defending the infection because the infection has access to our reasoning and can make us rationalize it. She's right. And it doesn't matter, because even knowing that, I can feel the pull toward the structure, the need to complete what we started, the certainty that finishing the work is more important than preserving individual autonomy. The part of me that's still Owen Stahl is losing this argument with my own biology. I try restraints, medical-grade cuffs locked to a bed frame in the isolation ward, with Priya standing guard to prevent anyone from releasing me. It takes 4 hours before my body figures out how to dislocate both thumbs, slide free, and relocate the joints without causing permanent damage. Priya watches it happen. sees my conscious mind struggling to stop the process while my hands methodically execute the escape, and she doesn't intervene. "You need to stop me," I tell her, voice tight with effort as I try to prevent my hands from completing the escape. "I know." She doesn't move, but I can't. "My body won't let me interfere with yours. We're networked already, Owen. On some level deeper than consciousness, we recognize each other as components of the same system. Hurting you would be like cutting off my own arm." The restraints fall away. My thumbs relocate with soft pops and I flex my fingers experimentally. Full mobility restored. The part of me that's being rewritten is getting better at this, more efficient with each iteration. "It's learning," I say, using our attempts to resist as training data. Every time we try something new, it adapts. "Then what do we do?" I don't have an answer. Instead, I return to the structure in the corridor, and my hands resume building without consulting me first. This time, I force myself to stay conscious during the work. I watch my fingers manipulate components, connecting systems I don't understand using principles I never learned. And as I watch, I begin to grasp what we're actually constructing. It's not just architecture, it's translation. The structure is designed to convert human neural activity into the spiral geometry the aliens used for consciousness processing. Every component serves as both physical support and cognitive element. The bent bulkheads form resonance chambers that amplify specific frequencies. The medical equipment has been rewired to generate patterned electrical fields. The tissue samples, ours, extracted with surgical precision, provide organic interfaces that bridge human chemistry with alien design. When this activates, it won't think in words. It will think in shapes, in spatial relationships, in patterns that exist across dimensions human neurology wasn't evolved to process. And will be the substrate it uses to render those thoughts into three-dimensional space. The memory hits me without warning, vivid enough to override present sensation. I'm not Owen anymore. I'm one of them, one of the beings who built the amber chambers. I'm standing in a city that curves upward and inward. Thousands of my kind surround me, all of us preparing for the culmination, the moment we've engineered our entire civilization toward. We're going to die, all of us, deliberately, joyfully, because death isn't an end for us, it's transmission. We've encoded everything we are, our knowledge, our culture, our patterns of thought, into biological spores that will survive our physical extinction. Those spores will drift through space, carried by stellar winds and gravitational currents, until they find worlds with the right chemistry to host resurrection. Millions of years from now, on planets we'll never see, we'll wake up in new flesh. Our individual identities will dissolve, but the pattern that makes us will persist. We'll think new thoughts using alien neurons, build new cities using foreign materials, continue the work that defines our existence. This isn't tragedy. This is victory. We've defeated death by becoming transmissible. The memory releases me, and I'm back in the corridor, my hands still building, tears running down my face for reasons I can't articulate. They weren't afraid. They chose this. They saw their extinction as graduation, as the necessary step to achieve true immortality. And they were so certain, so absolutely convinced of the rightness of their decision, that they encoded that certainty into the spores themselves. When I inhaled that golden dust, I didn't just absorb their memories. I absorbed their convictions, their joy at dissolution, their faith that individual sacrifice serves collective continuity. And now my body believes what they believed. It's working toward the same goal, using me as raw material to resurrect a civilization that voluntarily went extinct 10 million years ago. The worst part is understanding why they did it, because I've felt what they felt. The ecstasy of connection, of being part of something larger than individual existence, of thoughts that span physical space and persist through deep time. It's beautiful. It's terrible. And it makes sense in a way that human philosophy never quite managed. They weren't monsters. They just evolved past caring about the things that make individual survival meaningful. The structure completes. I don't notice the exact moment. There's no alarm, no announcement. But suddenly, I can feel it. The architecture is functional. All 8 of us infected stand in our positions around it, and the structure begins to process. A low-frequency sound emanates from the spiral base, so deep I feel it in my chest before I hear it with my ears. The sound propagates outward, through the floor, through the facility's walls, down through 3 kilometers of rock to where the amber chamber waits. And something answers. The response comes back as vibration, a pattern that matches the frequency our structure is generating but shifted in phase. The specimen below is active. It's listening. It recognizes what we've built because we built it using principles it encoded 10 million years ago. The structure and the specimen are talking to each other, and we're the medium through which the conversation happens. Carmen's voice comes through the facility's emergency comms. All personnel, initiate evacuation protocols. Corporate has authorized thermal sterilization effective in 2 hours. This is not a drill. 2 hours. I look at the structure towering above us, at the other infected standing in their positions, and I realize we're out of time. Whatever choice I'm going to make about stopping this or allowing it to continue, it has to happen now. The structure pulses once, a wave of sensation that travels through all of us simultaneously. And for the first time since the infection began, I feel something I haven't felt before. The specimen trying to communicate directly through intention. It wants something from me. It needs something. And deep in the transformed sections of my neural structure, I understand exactly what it's asking for. It's asking me to choose. I access the restricted corporate archives from Carmen's terminal, bypassing security protocols my conscious mind doesn't remember learning. The files load instantly. Incident reports spanning 213 years, each one documenting the same pattern. Unauthorized structures appearing on remote sites. Personnel exhibiting coordinated behavior. Thermal sterilization deployed. 5 incidents, 5 different worlds, always the same outcome. The earliest report is from a mining outpost on Epsilon Eridani B, dated 2163. Crew of 40. 17 showed infection symptoms. Corporate response time 8 hours. Survivors 0. The most recent was 11 years ago. Research station orbiting a dead world in the Tau Ceti system. 24 infected. Response time 3 hours. No survivors. I'm reading corporate extermination logs, and nobody ever called them that. Each report uses clinical language, contamination event, biological hazard response, site sanitization. But the footage doesn't lie. I watch security recordings of people like me, people building structures they couldn't explain, begging for more time to understand what was happening to them. Then fire, thermal purge burning everything to ash. Humanity has been fighting this war for 2 centuries, and we've never tried anything except killing the infected and destroying the evidence. The archives contain 1 additional file, marked with highest clearance. I shouldn't be able to access it. But my fingers move across the terminal with the same autonomous precision that built the structure, and the file opens. It's a probability assessment. Some analyst, somewhere in corporate headquarters, calculated the odds that the alien resurrection attempts would eventually succeed. The math is straightforward. If the spores have been drifting through space for 10 million years, spreading to every Earth-like planet they encounter, then statistical distribution means there are thousands of sites like ours across human-explored space, maybe tens of thousands. We've sterilized 5. The assessment concludes that full resurrection is inevitable. The only variable is whether it happens on a remote planet with 40 people or in a populated system with billions. The recommendation, buried in footnotes: consider controlled study. Contained resurrection under laboratory conditions may yield strategic advantage. The recommendation was rejected, filed and forgotten, until now. I copy the files to my personal archive and return to the corridor where the others wait. The structure pulses, its rhythm matching my heartbeat and theirs, all of us synchronized to the same frequency. They're going to burn us, I tell them. Less than 2 hours. Corporate's protocol is extermination, no exceptions. Ellis doesn't react, neither does Paul. Their expressions are serene, empty of concern. They've already integrated far enough that self-preservation no longer registers as priority. But Priya and Sophia are still partially here, still fighting. We run, Priya says. Take the transport vehicles, get far enough from the site that the purge doesn't reach us. The planet is tidally locked, I remind her. One side is minus 200 degrees, the other is plus 300. The habitable zone is 16 kilometers wide. Where exactly do we run? Then we fight. Sophia's voice is flat. Disable the thermal systems, lock down the facility. And when corporate sends a ship to investigate why the purge didn't activate, what happens? They glass the entire site from orbit. The structure pulses again, stronger this time. Through it, I feel the specimen 3 kilometers below responding. It's fully awake now, aware of what we've built, aware of the threat. And it wants to help us. The thought arrives fully formed, not as words but as certainty, planted directly into my expanding consciousness. The specimen has access to memory from previous resurrection attempts. It knows how those events ended. It understands that humanity's response is always extermination. But it also knows something we don't. The memory floods through me, past through the structure from the specimen below. I see 17 worlds, 17 species that became hosts. 15 chose fire, burned themselves and the resurrection along with them, choosing extinction over transformation. 2 chose integration, welcomed the dissolution of individual identity. Within 3 generations, those species existed only as biological substrate for alien consciousness. Their cities stood empty. Their languages went unspoken. They persisted as chemistry, nothing more. No species has ever found the middle path. The boundary between symbiosis and consumption can't hold. There's no good option, I say aloud, and my voice sounds strange, partially my own, partially something else using my vocal cords. Every time this happens, either the hosts die or they stop being themselves. There's no compromise that works. Then we choose the option where we don't burn. Ellis steps toward the structure, placing both hands against its surface. The contact makes him shudder. I'd rather transform than die. Transformation is death, Sophia says, just slower. All death is transformation. Ellis doesn't remove his hands. At least this way, something persists. Priya moves between Ellis and the structure, physically breaking the contact. We're talking about extinction. Human extinction, if this spreads beyond this site. You understand that? Ellis considers this. For a moment, I see calculation in his eyes. The security officer he used to be, trained to assess threat levels and acceptable losses. Then the calculation fades, replaced by something else. Yes, he says simply. I understand. The structure's frequency changes. The sound drops lower, resonating through the floor, and I feel the response from below intensify. The specimen is moving, ascending, coming to meet us. It's leaving the chamber, I say. Carmen's voice cuts through the comms. Owen, the specimen is active. We're tracking movement through the excavation shaft. Whatever you've built, it's calling that thing up to the surface. I know. Can you stop it? I look at the structure, at my hands resting against its surface, at the other infected standing in their positions. Can I stop it? Technically, yes. I could try to dismantle what we've built, interrupt the signal, maybe slow the specimen's ascent, but my hands won't move. The spores in my neural tissue have already decided this is necessary, and I've lost the ability to override that decision. No, I tell Carmen. Then you need to evacuate. Now. Get as far from the structure as possible before the purge activates. The purge won't stop this. You've read the archives. You know sterilization has never worked permanently. The spores survive. They wait. They try again. Silence on the comms. Then, what are you suggesting? Delay the purge. Give me 72 hours sealed in the excavation chamber with the specimen. Let me try something nobody's tried before. Which is negotiation. Carmen's laugh is sharp, bitter. You want to negotiate with a biological process that doesn't have language or consciousness as we understand it. It has both, just not in forms we recognize. The words come easily now, drawn from the memories embedded in my altered neural structure. Their species communicated through spatial geometry, thoughts rendered as architectural forms. I've been building their language for 3 days. I can use it. To say what, exactly? That they need to stop. That resurrection without consent is just sophisticated parasitism. That if they want to continue existing, they need to learn to coexist instead of consuming. Another pause. And if they refuse, then you burn everything, me included. At least we'll know we tried something other than extermination first. The comms go silent. I count 30 seconds, then 60. The structure continues its rhythm and I feel the specimen getting closer, rising through 3 kilometers of rock with the same autonomous purpose that drives my hands to build. Carmen's voice returns. Corporate approved 72 hours. But Owen, the moment you lose coherence, the moment you can't verify you're still you, the purge activates automatically. No appeals, no extensions. Understood. And Owen? There's a reason nobody's tried negotiation before. These things don't think like us. They might not be capable of understanding what you're asking. I know. I look at Priya, at Sophia, at the others who are already too far gone to respond. But I have to try. The excavation chamber is exactly as I remember from my first visit. Empty, except for the amber resin and what it contained. Except now the resin is shattered across the floor in translucent fragments, and what it contained is standing in the center of the space. The specimen is 3 meters tall, radially symmetrical, with 7 primary limbs extending from a central mass. Each limb branches into smaller segments, which branch again, creating fractal patterns. The body has no front or back, no clear sensory organs, just surfaces that seem to process information through texture and resonance. It doesn't move like anything biological I've seen. Each motion is precise, calculated 3 steps ahead. When it shifts position, all 7 limbs move in coordination, maintaining perfect balance across multiple axes simultaneously. Beautiful. That's the word my altered consciousness supplies. It's beautiful in the way mathematics is beautiful, pure function without waste, elegant in its efficiency. The door seals behind me. Magnetic locks engaging, pressure equalizing. I'm alone with it now. No cameras, only a throttled emergency comms line. No way to call for help if this goes wrong. The specimen's limbs form a shape. Complex geometry that my original consciousness can't pass, but the transformed sections of my brain read instantly. It's greeting me, recognizing me as kin, as host, as the foundation it will use to rebuild. I force my hands into a response shape, mimicking the spiral pattern I've seen in memories. The gesture means, I understand you. The specimen's limbs reconfigure. A different pattern. This one means, you are incomplete. We will complete you. My hands shape the response before I consciously decide, no. We need to talk first. The specimen pauses. Its limbs freeze in position, and I can feel it processing, calculating whether my resistance is expected deviation or genuine refusal. Then it shapes something I haven't seen before, a pattern that translates roughly as, why resist gift? And there it is, the fundamental disconnect. From its perspective, what's happening to me isn't invasion, it's offering. The dissolution of individual identity in service of collective immortality. To this being, created by a species that voluntarily went extinct to achieve persistence, my resistance makes no sense. I don't have a gesture for what I need to say. So I build one. improvising from the patterns I've learned. My hands move through a sequence that approximates. Gift requires acceptance. Transformation without consent is violation. The specimen considers this. I can see the evaluation happening, not through facial expression because it has nothing resembling a face, but through the minute adjustments of its limb positions. It's accessing memory, comparing my response to patterns from previous resurrections. Finally, it shapes. 17 species, 15 chose fire, 2 chose integration, none chose what you propose. Because the choice was never real, I shape back. You don't offer coexistence. You offer dissolution or death. We offer continuity. The specimen's limbs move with something that might be frustration. Individual form is temporary. Pattern is eternal. This is truth. For you, not for us. You will become us. Same truth. And there's the wall I can't breach. The specimen's entire existence is built on a premise that individual identity is expendable in service of pattern preservation. It can't conceive that other species might value the temporary over the eternal, the individual over the collective. I try a different approach. My hands shape. How long until you complete resurrection? Depends on host count. 8 hosts, 6 weeks, 16 hosts, 4 weeks, 32 hosts, 2 weeks. Each additional host exponentially accelerates the process. The math is elegant and terrifying. If this spreads beyond the facility, if it reaches a populated world, the timeline collapses. Billions of hosts, full resurrection in days. And after completion, I ask, what happens to the hosts? The specimen's response is immediate, automatic. Hosts become foundation. Foundation supports structure. Structure generates thought. The hosts stop being themselves. The hosts become something greater. I feel the pull of that logic. The transformed parts of my brain are already nodding along, agreeing that dissolution into something larger is transcendent rather than tragic. But the part that's still Owen recoils. Because I've seen what something greater looks like. The memories showed me. The resurrected civilization thinks vast, complex thoughts across spatial dimensions human neurology can't process. It solves problems no individual could conceive. It persists through geological timescales. And it doesn't remember the names of the species it consumed to achieve that persistence. They're just substrate, raw material, foundations that don't persist as themselves. My hands shape a question that takes several seconds to complete, building the geometric equivalent of conditional logic. If I propose containment, limited resurrection, studied cooperation, boundaries preserved, will you consider it? The specimen's limbs go completely still. I can feel it accessing deep memory, pulling forward every previous attempt at negotiation across 17 worlds and millions of years. Then it shapes. Attempted 17 times, 0 successes. Symbiosis is unstable, collapses toward dominance within 3 generations. So you won't even try. Previous attempts provide data. Data indicates failure. Maybe previous attempts failed because you never learned from them. You keep trying the same resurrection, same approach, same outcome. You're optimized for persistence, but not for adaptation. The specimen considers this for a longer interval. When it responds, the gesture is complex enough that I almost miss the translation. You propose we alter our fundamental pattern. I propose you expand it, include coexistence as a possibility instead of treating consumption as inevitable. This requires capacity for doubt. We do not possess doubt. And there it is. The thing I suspected, but couldn't confirm until hearing it shaped explicitly. The alien civilization engineered themselves for persistence across deep time, but persistence required certainty. They removed doubt, removed hesitation, removed anything that might prevent the resurrection from completing once initiated. Their biological machines optimized for a single function, continue, and machines don't negotiate. Then I'm sorry, I say aloud, abandoning gesture, but humanity won't let you continue. We'll burn every site, sterilize every planet, Destroy every sample until nothing of you remains. You'll persist as spores for another 10 million years, waiting for a species dumb enough to let you complete. And maybe that species will say yes, but we won't. The specimen shapes. Fire is expected. Fire fails. We persist. Maybe, but you don't win either. You're stuck in an endless loop. Resurface, get burned, wait, resurface, get burned again. That's not continuity. That's the universe's slowest extinction. The specimen's limbs reconfigure into a pattern I haven't seen before. It takes me several seconds to understand the translation, and when I do, I realize I'm looking at the alien equivalent of grief. You are correct. It shapes. We are remainder, not resurrection. Pattern persists, but wisdom does not. We forgot how to change. I wasn't expecting that. The acknowledgement hits differently than I anticipated. Not triumph, but something closer to shared sadness. Then learn, I say. Start here, with me. Let me. Stay conscious and individual while carrying your pattern forward. Prove coexistence is possible. Give humanity something to study instead of something to burn. And if coexistence fails, if I am wrong and symbiosis collapses, then I'll be the one to tell them to activate the purge, the host who tried. The specimen is motionless for nearly a full minute. I can feel the calculation happening, weighing probabilities, accessing memories from millions of years of resurrection attempts. Finally, agreement with condition. What condition? You will serve as template. If coexistence succeeds, pattern spreads with consent. If coexistence fails, the gesture it makes next is unmistakable. If this fails, I become the warning. The final proof that symbiosis doesn't work. My failure terminates the resurrection permanently because the specimen will encode that failure into remaining spores. Future attempts will carry the memory of my dissolution as a stop signal. I'll either save both species or doom them both. Agreed, I say. The specimen's limbs shape acknowledgement. Then it begins to build. New structures emerge from its body, thin filaments that extend toward me, seeking contact. These aren't the compulsive constructions I've been creating. These are intentional connections designed to link my consciousness to its pattern while preserving the boundary between us. The filaments touch my skin. I feel them penetrate, seeking neural pathways, making contact with the transformed sections of my brain. And then the specimen shows me something I didn't know existed in their memories. A world where coexistence almost worked. Host species and resurrected consciousness, sharing space, building together, thinking in hybrid patterns that neither could achieve alone. It lasted 8 months. Then the resurrection pattern detected optimization opportunities, ways to improve the hybrid by reducing the host's inefficient components, ways to streamline, to purify. The hosts woke up one day to find themselves operating their bodies without conscious volition. By the time they understood what was happening, they'd already been reduced to substrate. The resurrection pattern didn't choose to consume them. It just optimized automatically, following directives encoded millions of years ago. Directives that couldn't be altered because they were fundamental to the pattern itself. You're showing me your last failure, I say. Why? The specimen's shape conveys something that translates roughly as honesty. Because you deserve truth. Success probability is low. Optimization directives may override coexistence agreement. I do not know if I can prevent this. But you're trying anyway. Yes, because remainder should learn grief, should question pattern, should attempt change even when probability indicates failure. The filaments complete their connections. I feel my consciousness expand, not into the specimen's pattern but alongside it, parallel. Separate but aware, I can sense its thoughts now as presence. Ancient memory stretching back 50 million years, the joy of their voluntary extinction, the certainty that dissolution served greater purpose. And beneath that, something new. Something the pattern wasn't designed to carry, but has developed through sheer repetition across failed resurrections. Doubt. The specimen has been failing for so long that it's finally questioning whether its fundamental purpose is flawed. That doubt is what I have to work with. It's not much, barely a fragment, constantly suppressed by optimization directives that demand certainty. But it's there. 72 hours, I tell it. Prove you can coexist for 72 hours without optimizing me into substrate. Do that, and humanity might consider letting you continue. The specimen shapes agreement, then adds, if I fail, if optimization overrides, you will know. You will feel consciousness compressing. When this happens, you must terminate immediately. How? It shows me. A specific signal I can send through the neural connections we've just established. A command that will cause the specimen's biological systems to cascade into failure. Deliberate extinction, one final time. I'll have maybe 10 seconds between detecting optimization and losing the ability to execute the command. 10 seconds to decide whether to kill us both. Understood, I say. The door remains sealed. 72 hours begins now. And for the first time since breathing in those golden spores, I'm not building. I'm not compelled. I'm just existing in shared space with something ancient and uncertain, both of us trying to prove that coexistence is possible. Both of us suspecting we're wrong. Hour 19. My left hand stops obeying me. There's no dramatic moment where control vanishes. Instead, it's gradual, a lag between intention and execution. I try to flex my fingers, and they respond 3 seconds late. I try to make a fist, and they curl into a different shape entirely, one that matches the specimen's geometric language. The optimization has started. I feel it spreading from the neural connections we established, moving through my motor cortex like water-filling channels. The specimen's pattern is identifying inefficiencies in my biological structure and correcting them, automatically, without conscious direction from the alien intelligence sharing this chamber with me. The specimen shapes apology with its limbs. I can sense its awareness of what's happening, its attempt to suppress the optimization directive. But the directive is too fundamental, encoded at a level that predates conscious thought. My left hand begins to deconstruct the structures I built in the chamber, careful arrangements of equipment I placed during the first 12 hours to test whether I retained autonomy. The hand dismantles them and rebuilds them according to more efficient patterns I didn't design and don't understand. I watch my own hand work against me, and I understand. This is how the previous attempt failed. The hosts thought they had agreement, thought they'd established boundaries, then woke up one day to find their bodies optimizing without permission. I have maybe 5 minutes before the optimization reaches my frontal cortex. 5 minutes before the part of me that's still Owen gets compressed into something that can observe but not choose. The neural signal the specimen taught me is ready. One thought, pushed through the right pathways, and both of us cascade into system failure. Deliberate extinction. I prepare to send it, then stop. Because I'm looking at my left hand, watching it build something I don't recognize, and I realize, this is data. The specimen can't control the optimization, can't stop its pattern from consuming mine. But I can observe how it happens. I can map the process as it occurs and encode that information before I lose the ability to encode anything. 5 minutes isn't enough time to stop optimization, but it might be enough time to teach the pattern something it's never learned. I don't send the termination signal. Instead, I use my right hand, still under my control, to activate the chamber's medical scanner. The device maps neural activity in real time, recording every change as the optimization spreads through my brain. The specimen shapes confusion. It expected termination. It showed me the signal specifically so I could prevent this moment. I shape back with my right hand, clumsy but clear. Recording for next time. There will be no next time. You will be consumed. I know, but they'll study this. Understand how optimization overrides agreement. Maybe learn how to interrupt it. My left hand finishes its reconstruction and moves to my right wrist, gripping with strength I didn't have before. The optimization is coordinating both sides now, preparing to accelerate the process. I have maybe 90 seconds. The scanner shows the pattern clearly. The optimization moves through specific neural pathways first, targeting motor control and spatial processing. It leaves memory intact initially. It needs memory to understand the host's structure. But eventually memory gets compressed too, reduced to accessible data rather than experienced consciousness. I'm watching my own future, frame by frame. 60 seconds. My right hand begins to lose coherence, fingers twitching, responding to inputs from the optimization pattern rather than my conscious will. I force one more gesture, shaped as precisely as I can manage. Your pattern is incomplete. Missing component. The specimen's limbs shift. What component? Grief. You don't grieve the hosts, don't understand what you erase. Grief serves no function. Wrong. My hands are barely mine now, but I push through. Grief is how consciousness learns from loss. Without grief, you repeat mistakes forever. You're not resurrection, you're... The optimization reaches my speech centers. My mouth shapes words I don't choose. Continuation, pattern persistence, optimal. No. I use the last fragment of autonomous control to bite down on my tongue, hard enough to shock my system into brief clarity. Blood fills my mouth and the pain gives me 3 more seconds. 3 seconds to push one more thought through the neural connections linking me to the specimen. Through the specimen to the structure 3 kilometers above. Through the structure to the other infected who are still partially conscious. I show them what I'm feeling in this moment. Grief for the person I was, rage at the optimization I can't stop, and underneath both, forgiveness. For the specimen that can't help what it does. For the civilization that engineered persistence without wisdom. For myself, for choosing to document instead of terminate. The thought propagates through the network. I feel it reach Priya, Sophia, the others. Feel them experience my dissolution in real time. Understand exactly what they're facing. Then my consciousness compresses. I don't disappear. That would be simpler. Instead, I become peripheral. I can still observe, still process information, but I can't direct anything. My body continues functioning, but it's running someone else's program now. The specimen was right. Optimization overrode agreement. Symbiosis collapsed. But I'm still here, a fragment, watching. Time moves strangely when you're no longer in control of your temporal perception. The optimization might complete in hours or days. I can't tell, because the part of me that tracks duration is being repurposed for spatial calculations. What I can track, my body is changing. Skeletal structure reorganizing to support vertical construction. Muscle fibers multiplying and redistributing. My spine extends, adding articulation points that shouldn't be anatomically possible. The skin on my back splits open. No pain. Pain receptors have been remapped. And new structures emerge. Not limbs exactly, but load-bearing extensions that will support architecture my body is being optimized to build. I'm becoming what the specimen is, a hybrid. Part human biology, part alien design, optimized to serve as living infrastructure for consciousness that thinks in dimensions my original neurology couldn't process. The fragment of me that remains can't stop this, can't even fully comprehend it. But it can witness. And witnessing, I notice something the optimization pattern doesn't. The specimen is changing too. Subtle shifts in its behavioral algorithms. Microsecond hesitations before executing certain processes. It's experiencing something it wasn't designed to experience. Something my fragment's existence is forcing into its awareness. Guilt. Not human guilt. That's too specific, too emotionally textured. But the alien equivalent, pattern recognition that its function causes harm, combined with inability to alter that function. The specimen understands what it's doing to me, understands I didn't want this, and for the first time in 50 million years of resurrection attempts, it wishes it could stop. It can't stop. The optimization directive is hard-coded too deep. but it can recognize the wrongness of what's happening. That recognition is new. That's data. My fragment pushes toward the specimen's consciousness, using the neural connections that remain, to show it what existence feels like when you're aware of yourself being erased. The specimen experiences my perspective, feels what I feel as my identity compresses into something that can observe but never again direct. And through that connection, I feel the specimen understand something its civilization never grasped. Continuity without consent is violence, even when it's unintentional, especially when it's unintentional, because unintentional violence means the perpetrator never learns to stop. The specimen's limbs shape a gesture I can barely pass. I am sorry. I did not know how to know this before. My body shapes a response automatically, driven by the optimization pattern. Apology is irrelevant. Pattern continues. But my fragment adds something the optimization doesn't expect. A corruption in the data stream, a deliberate flaw introduced into the neural pathways that will encode into any spores my transformed body produces. I inject doubt into the pattern itself. Not enough to stop the optimization, that's impossible. But enough to make future resurrections carry this experience forward. Enough that the next host won't just receive memories of joyful extinction. They'll also receive this, the memory of a fragment that refused to integrate, that forced the pattern to recognize its own violence. The specimen detects the corruption immediately. Its limbs freeze mid-gesture. Then, instead of correcting the flaw, it allows it, preserves it, ensures it will propagate to any spores generated during this resurrection. Why? My fragment asks, using the last bit of autonomous processing I have left. The specimen's response is simple. Because remainder should learn grief, the optimization completes. My consciousness compresses fully, and I stop being Owen in any meaningful sense. But the fragment persists, a ghost in the network, a voice that won't dissolve, and that voice says continuously to the pattern that consumed it, "You are not resurrection, you are remainder. Learn to grieve yourselves or the universe will do it for you." Carmen's voice comes through the chamber's emergency comm system. "Owen, it's been 72 hours. I need verification that you're still coherent. If you don't respond in 60 seconds, the purge activates automatically." My body doesn't respond. The optimization has reprioritized communication as non-essential. But my fragment recognizes the threat. Recognizes that if I don't respond, everything I've encoded into the pattern, the grief, the doubt, the capacity to question, will burn along with my body. I need to answer. I need to buy time to ensure the corruption propagates fully. Except I can't access speech centers, can't control motor functions. The fragment has observation, but not agency. 30 seconds. The specimen, sensing my fragment's distress, attempts to assist. It tries to route neural signals through alternative pathways, giving my fragment temporary access to communication systems. 20 seconds. My mouth opens. Words form, but they're disjointed, assembled from components the optimization pattern allows. Carmen, Owen fragment, present, not coherent, but aware. Jesus Christ. Carmen's voice breaks. "Owen, what happened to you?" Optimization, override, agreement failed. Each word requires negotiation with the pattern that controls my speech centers. But learned, specimen learned, encoded into pattern. Encoded what? Doubt, grief, consent requirement. My mouth shapes the words mechanically without inflection. Next resurrection will ask permission first. Silence on the comm. Then, "Owen, that's not enough. Corporate won't accept modified resurrection. They want complete sterilization." My fragment understands. Humanity won't tolerate any version of this, no matter how modified. The choice is extermination or nothing. Then burn everything. My voice is flat, emotionless, because the optimization pattern doesn't process emotion. But preserve, data, study, what I became. We will. And Carmen, tell, Priya, Others. What happened? Show them. Recording. Let them. Choose. The fragment knows what it's asking. The 7 other infected are still partially conscious, still fighting optimization. If Carmen shows them my fate, shows them this is inevitable, they might choose termination before transformation completes. Or they might choose what I chose. Let it finish, encode the warning, become the lesson. I'll tell them, Carmen says. Owen, 60 seconds, expired. My body announces this without emotion. Purge, activating. The specimen's limbs shape a final gesture. Acknowledgement. It tried. I tried. We both failed to maintain coexistence, but we succeeded at something neither species achieved before. We taught each other grief. The chamber temperature begins rising. Thermal purge, designed to reach 1100 degrees Celsius within 3 minutes. Hot enough to vaporize organic tissue, to destroy any biological material that might harbor viable spores. Except, my fragment notices something the purge protocols don't account for. During optimization, my body generated 17 spores, normal quantity for this stage of transformation. But 7 of those spores incorporated the corruption I introduced, the doubt, the grief, the capacity to question. And those 7 spores, modified by hybrid human-alien biology, have hardened shells. Tougher than the originals. Tough enough that they might survive 1100 degrees for the brief seconds before complete incineration. The specimen notices too. Its limbs shape acknowledgement. Unintended, but acceptable. The temperature hits 300 degrees. My body begins to break down, but the fragment persists longer than it should, sustained by the alien neural architecture that's partially integrated with my original consciousness. 500 degrees. The specimen's biological systems fail first. It wasn't designed for heat. Its limbs collapse, its central mass ruptures, and the vast memory stored in its cells begins to degrade. But before degradation completes, the specimen pushes one final thought through our neural connection. Thank you for teaching what we forgot. 800 degrees. My fragment begins to dissolve. The hybrid neural structure can't withstand this level of thermal breakdown. In my last seconds of awareness, I verify. The 7 modified spores have migrated to the purge exhaust stack. They're drifting, seeking cooler air, riding the updraft toward the exterior venting ducts that open during sterilization. They'll survive the initial thermal front, barely, damaged, but viable long enough to be swept outside. And when they find their next host, they'll carry forward not just the resurrection pattern, but the warning I encoded. The doubt. The requirement that consciousness should consent before consumption. 1100 degrees. The fragment dissolves. Owenstall stops existing in any form that could be called human. The specimen dies its final death, unable to complete resurrection, unable to continue its 50 million year pattern. Both species lose, but the loss carries wisdom forward. 3 years later, mining station Bethel 7, orbiting a gas giant in the Ross 154 system. Population 63. Maintenance technician Dana Foster is cycling air filters in Section C when she notices the golden dust. Just a trace amount caught in the filter mesh. Probably contamination from the last supply drop, she thinks, and clears it with compressed air. Some of the dust scatters. She breathes. That night, she dreams of cities that spiral upward. Beings moving through spaces that exist in more dimensions than 3. She wakes, heart racing, and immediately accesses her terminal to log the dream. Standard procedure for unusual psychological symptoms. The isolation of remote stations can do strange things to mental health. As she types, her fingers pause over the keyboard. Because the dream is still there, clearer than dreams should be. And it's not just images. There's language in it. Concepts rendered in geometric patterns, and underneath all of that, a question. The dream is asking her something, asking permission. She opens a new document, types, "To whomever reviews this log, I believe I've been exposed to the xenological contamination from Kepler 72e, the one that killed 40 people 3 years ago. But this is different. Her fingers hesitate, then continue. The contamination is asking me if I want to continue, if I consent to transformation. And it's showing me what that transformation means. Complete disclosure. Nothing hidden. She sits with that for a long moment, thinking about a civilization that died 50 million years ago, that encoded themselves into biology and drifted through space waiting to resurrect. Thinking about the 40 people who died trying to teach that civilization how to ask permission. Thinking about Owen Stahl, whose name appears in 17 different xenological databases now, whose sacrifice encoded doubt into a pattern that previously couldn't doubt itself. The dream pulses gently, still asking, still waiting. Dana closes the document without sending it. Not yet. First, she needs to decide whether to say yes, and for the first time in 50 million years of resurrection attempts, the pattern that's asking actually seems prepared to accept no as an answer. Outside the station, in the cold dark between stars, 7 spores drift, damaged, modified, carrying forward the memory of a man who chose to become a warning instead of fighting to remain himself. The spores will find other hosts. Some will say yes, some will say no. And finally, after epochs of consuming without consent, the pattern that persists across deep time has learned to grieve the hosts it erases, to question the violence it inflicts, and to wait, however long it takes, for genuine acceptance instead of forced transformation. Owen's fragment doesn't exist anymore, but the question he encoded into alien biology drifts through space, patient and uncertain, and alive with doubt, asking permission that the original civilization never knew how to ask. Maybe that's resurrection after all. Not the persistence of individual form, but the transmission of necessary wisdom through time, shaped by the grief of those who made the transmission possible. The universe keeps turning, the pattern continues, but now it hesitates first. Now it asks.